Let's call this meeting to order, please. What's the first item on the agenda? Hold on, let me get the agenda.
The statement regarding virtual meetings is in your packet. We do not need to read it, but would be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any with regard to that statement.
Okay. Any questions, committee?
If
Hearing
not,
none.
do the roll, please.
Okay.
I'm sorry, were we ready for a roll call?
Yes.
Mr. Blackwood?
Here.
Mr. Holland?
Here.
Ms. O'Bannon?
Here.
Ms. Page?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, with regard to, are there any introductions that need to be done today?
We don't have anyone new on the.
Anyone new?
No.
Okay, that's great. Let's move to item C, December 22nd, 2020 minutes, meeting minutes. Are there any corrections or updates? And if not, may I have a motion to approve?
Mr. Holland,
Yes, sir.
we had a discussion before you got on about the fact that we got this so late. I'm not too sure any of us have had time to really go through them in detail
We can defer them till next meeting then. Let's defer them till next meeting.
Good idea.
I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Okay.
I appreciate that. I apologize. All right, new business. What's revised November, December financial statements, page 6.
Thank you. I have a set of slides that I'll switch to, but the financial statements are here on the screen as well. Want to just sort of orient everybody. When we met last month, we dedicated quite a bit of that discussion to the space planning discussion, and we will be picking up that topic again next month. We're kind of alternating so that we can be respectful of your time, but also trying to focus this meeting specifically on our finances and our financial improvement plan. The November financial statements have been slightly updated. The big picture for November and December doesn't change and are, as we shared with you at our December meeting when we reviewed November's financial statements, given the holidays and the continued leave that we expected to see in December, the financial position in December did not improve. The detailed financial statements are included in your packet. And I'm going to walk through some analysis of that, but I'll first just kind of go through each of the sets of the financial statements. So first and foremost, you've got the balance sheet from November. Again, you'll see in November the closing reserve fund balance there is still over the $1 million threshold. We're at $1,068,868. So despite the year-to-date profit and loss through the end of November being not where we want it to be, we are still in compliance with the fund balance objective. Here you'll see, and if with your permission, Mr. Holland, I'll skip to the December financials because they do show every month in the year. So we're not being repetitive here.
Sure, that's right. Unless someone objects, sure, no problem.
So skipping to page 13 of the packet, the profit and loss statement for each month is listed here. December is on the far left. July is on the right with totals. I'll review a lot of this information too when I get to the slides, but as you can see, these financial statements through December do cover the period all the way through December 31st. So they are at the midpoint of our fiscal year. And so the column here on the far right is a nice comparison to be able to see. And you'll be able to see, particularly in our federal funding, we are lagging in revenue. So that is a major contributor to our current year-to-date position. Mrs. Sophia, I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. Hopefully that's easier to see.
I'm just trying to follow it here. It's not page 13 in mine, but that's okay. That's all. It's another page number, but I'm just trying to find the first number at the top of the page. Okay.
So we're on, yeah, if you're looking at your copy, we're on the December year-to-date financial statements. That's starting here, and it's the financial statement labeled December. So as I was mentioning, the year-to-date federal revenue is lagging. We're at 30% of budget for the year. So we definitely have some ground that we can and need to make up in the coming year, as would be expected because the state funding, generally speaking, follows our federal funding. That also is lagging. We're at just under 30% for state funding. On local funding.
Why is that lagging, Martha?
We are not spending as much time in our federal transportation programs as we would have predicted for this period in the year. A piece of that is what we've discussed before. Several of the staff members who took leave this year to date work in the transportation program. So when they take leave, they're not charging time. But also we just don't have as many people working in that program, which we're going to be working on reassigning.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and I should have said, I mean, feel free to break in and ask questions as we go along. I'm happy to work through that with you. Sorry, go ahead. On the local funding section, we are where we would expect to be. Largely that's because we record receipt of our local funding, the TPO special assessment, as well as our local membership dues on a 1/12 basis. So that will always be keeping pace with where we are relative to the fiscal year. So, you know, just due to some mathematical calculations there, you know, it's 50% for the TPO assessment, 49% for the local member dues. The overall here, what's bringing this ahead, if you will, is that, as you know, year to date, we haven't budgeted revenue for the CVTA project. So that's what's driving that number up from a pacing perspective. Once we complete the budget amendment to incorporate that in, it'll look a little bit more normal. But overall, the local funding is keeping pace with where it should be. And then private funding is a little bit low as well, largely due to just how we record those dollars as well. We have quarterly payments that come in, and so that funding will catch up over the course of the year. Because of how we have this community impact grant. You probably remember we had the $50,000 budget amendment, I think, approved at our last meeting. We haven't expended any funding in that grant award yet, so that's why we're seeing that lag there, but that'll pick up pretty quickly as soon as we get our consultant on board. So
Martha, could you tell us something about that grant?
Yes, ma'am. That is the Community Foundation granted us award this fall for $50,000 to assist us in capacity building for public outreach. And so we are scheduled to push an RFP out next week for consultant services on that. And we're scheduled to, and the RFP reflects project completion by June 15th of this year. So Community Foundation already dispersed the funding to us. We have it on hand and it sits in our deferred revenue account. And then as we pay the invoices on that, it will get receipted and recorded on the profit and loss.
So we're just holding the money and dispersing the money for them? You said we had a contractor.
No, it's a consultant project, 100% consulted work. So once we secure the contract with our consultant, we will pay those. We won't have to request funding from the Community Foundation. They paid the grant to us up front.
But is PlanRVA, or is someone at PlanRVA doing the work?
I am, yes.
Okay, so you're actually the one who's actually doing the work.
Yes, I am the project manager. So I wrote the RFP and will be managing the consultant.
All righty.
So you can see there from a total income perspective, just as you would guess, we're 35% of budget. So we definitely have some ground that we need to make up as far as that 15% differential there. Most of that sits in the federal grant awards that we need to become more effective in spending. On the expense side, most of the categories are pacing. So we have a lag in revenues and we have a nice, healthy expected pace in expenses. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment, but from a salary and wages perspective, we are right on target with that. I will share with you that we should expect to start to see a little bit of a decline in the pacing there. We budgeted more positions than we have filled. So over the next couple of months, we'll start to see kind of a tick down of that expenditure compared to year to date. And then a big part of this, everything's kind of pacing. I think we're still working on being able to create the comparative totals for you to really see line by line. You'll see a bunch of zeros here in the percentages. That's because while we're recording expenses according to, for example, leave wages and that kind of thing, we didn't have a budget set up for that. So we'll be working to improve that to get that to you so that you can see a more clear line by line comparison. The next section is our professional fees. We're pacing. We are right on track. As you probably are aware, we pay a monthly retainer for our legal fees, so that's pacing just as it should. We did set aside some additional funding, kind of an just in case we needed some additional above and beyond legal services. We have not had any expenditures in that category yet, so that's why you see the total legal services line at 38%, which is good. And then the next row is we budgeted $25,000 this year for contracted services related to HR or finance, and we have not expended any dollars in that line item as of yet. So that brings that total category for professional fees at 21% of budget for the year. Again, a good thing. For office expenses, we are right on budget. You'll see for that first section, the computer operations. Unfortunately, these are expenses that are incurred regardless of whether we're here in the office or we're working remotely. So these are pacing on the whole to be right on budget. And we are looking at those expenses, each of our individual subscriptions and software purchases to see if there are ways that we could cut expenses in this category to reduce spending in the upcoming 2 quarters. Terry and Diane, if I'm not mistaken, the issue with the broadband network and telephone billing has been completely resolved now. So we start to see a more normal billing here in November and December for that. So we've been able to get that under control. The second part of the office expenses category is our printing, supplies, postage, public outreach and advertisement. So again, we're pacing right where we would want to be. I'll say kudos to Diane and Terry. They've been working with our current copier managed services provider, the company that oversees our copier leasing and maintenance agreements. And we have renegotiated those copier leases so that we will see a savings in the months coming forward and for the remainder of the year. So we'll actually be, next step will be, I think, coordinating the delivery of new copy machines that are a bit more efficient, definitely more cost effective. We have eliminated the maintenance fees with regard to some of our owned copiers, particularly since we don't have a lot of folks in the office every day. We felt like that was an expense that we could absorb, or we could save that expense, and those changes will be coming into effect as soon as they can be scheduled. So current copiers are being taken away and new copiers will be brought in, and we'll start to see some reduction in expenses in that particular category, printing. Organizational, the next section are program expenses. Again, we're pacing on most of the categories. As you can imagine, we're seeing very few expenses in the travel category. Our year-to-date expenditures for travel is $176. We've budgeted $32,000. So I mean, we're really obviously staff members aren't traveling around the region or to other things, and I think that'll probably continue through the end of the fiscal year. Other areas where we've got this is the section of our budget where you see activity for our pass-through funds. So a handful of those pass-through grants have been delayed because of COVID-19, particularly in our emergency management program. We use a number of our emergency management grants to support the Alliance in training activities. We've not been able to host any of the in-person training events that were scheduled for this year. And so those grants are kind of put on pause right now. And then some of our public outreach activities, just we've had to kind of switch gears in how we do that because we're not doing in-person events. So each of the committees in the Emergency Management Alliance are working on how to reformulate our plans there. And I think we'll start to see activity pick up in the fourth quarter of this fiscal year, but it's not going to meet our previously budgeted expectations there. That is an in and out for us, so it's not a substantial impact to our bottom line, but it does show here in this section. The next section is our infrastructure category. We're actually operating, again, kind of right on pace here. Rent is pacing, monthly payments are made at 50%. Insurance is a little bit low, but right on pace. And then we did make a move this fiscal year to budget and expense the depreciation costs as we go. So that's also mathematically, it's just a 1/12 of the depreciation expenses for the year calculated. So on the whole, our total expenses are running below budget, 37%. A part of that is really in this pass through. So, our operating expenses are running right around 45%. So again, our expenses, while they are on budget on the whole, they're not reduced as much as the revenue is. So we have a mismatch there, which is resulting in this bottom line. Before our capital expenditures for the year, we've got a year-to-date operating net loss of $28,608. You can see month over month what those contributors were. In October and November, those are periods that we didn't see a lot of leave and holidays, and then you can see back when we have December, they creep back up again. When we factor in the capital expenses, that brings our total year-to-date net loss to $42,102. So one of the focus I wanted to bring to the discussion today is, what are we going to do about this?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that loss is a little more than we anticipated. Move back up to the screen if you would. And that is, for example, it says income is under budget by 15.7%, but the real challenge is salary reimbursements, an average of 56%. And move down just another level, and it says salary expenses 36% below. Program expenses are 36% below expected due to deadline extended. Community operations on budget. So the bigger challenge for us is the year-to-date average salary reimbursement area for salary and wages year-to-date. But move on, Martha, to what you're about to do. So that's a greater loss than we anticipated.
Yeah, so I mean, this line right here that you highlighted, this is a big part of our improvement plan. So just kind of to recap, looking at revenues, revenue is lagging in our urban transportation program. We had expected to have more staff activity in this program year to date, and so we need to correct that. We'll be reassigning staff members to be able to pick up the work that's not currently happening. And, also that will translate to picking up the billing in that particular program. In addition, the note in the financial statements references this, but there were some extensions due to COVID on some of our grants that expired in the fall of this year. While the extensions were certainly helpful to be able to have additional time to meet the grant requirements, it meant that delayed the start of new grants. So those new grants are now in effect. We have an unbudgeted new revenue source that we'll be bringing to you next month for inclusion in the budget, but we did get a new grant from the DEQ for $58,000. It starts January 1 and expires next December. So we're anticipating the ability to draw 40 to 50% of that funding. So about, $26,000 for this new fiscal year. And then we're working to pick up steam on those newly started grant projects. But really, I mean, this is a big piece of it. We need to improve, we need to pick up the pace in our allocation of time and capture of revenue in these grant funded programs.
Martha, if I could interrupt just a second. We have, we're behind on the income because we didn't have the billable time with the going on in the fall, but yet we've still paying all the salaries for the people who should have been working on that stuff, but they didn't have the stuff to work on. So have we been able to utilize them in other ways to cover the expense of those salaries?
No, I mean, the short answer is, I mean, staff members have worked on what they were assigned to work on, but when we take leave, we don't get reimbursed for that leave time. So, you know, if I take leave that hour or day, whatever it ends up being, we're not eligible to get reimbursed for that. The agency covers it. So that's a piece of it.
I appreciate that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where we were budgeting to work on different projects that have been delayed, postponed, but we still have the people there working and getting paid who we have on board to do those projects. What have we been having them do instead of those projects during that time?
So in our emergency management program, the projects that have been delayed are pass-through grants. So it's purchase of equipment and things like that. The work to support the Alliance still continues. So our emergency management coordinator is continuing to support the Emergency Management Alliance. We're just not able to purchase the equipment for the in-person training events and things like that. In the environmental program, it's a little bit of a different story. Those programs, the start of the new programs was delayed because the programs that were originally scheduled to expire on September 30th were extended to December 30th. So staff still worked on the grant programs for a longer period of time, but no new revenue comes in to support that. So to your point, I mean, that's kind of the crux of it. We're working on these programs, but we don't have, during that period, we don't have additional revenue to cover those costs.
So you're saying those revenues will come in though eventually?
Yes, the new grant terms start January 1 for two of them, and all of the projects that have expired this year have expired, and we've transitioned to the new grants now.
So the new grants though will reimburse us for this cost we've spent okay. So in other words, we've been overstaffed for the situation then.
We absorb the cost of those extensions. That's absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
On the expense side, kind of just Mr. Peterson, what you're speaking to, I mean, what that means is that those particular programs have experienced overruns. We've spent more in time and cost than we planned to, and the agency has to absorb the cost of that. So particularly in the environmental programs, we have program overruns in those areas.
Martha, going back to the leave wages, is that part of the cyclical nature of holidays, your 78% of the annual budget, or are you tracking to be significantly over for the year?
Year to date, we've had a lot more leave than we normally do. I think part of that is due to just a delay in scheduled vacations and leave. So folks our financial position was much better than we expected last year because people didn't take leave in the fourth quarter. And many of those folks did take leave in the first quarter this year. So, I mean, a piece of it is just the unfortunate timing of the break in the fiscal year and how leave changed. But another piece of it is, I mean, I think we're all sort of in uncharted territory here. If staff members continue to take the leave that they have in the first two quarters and the second two quarters, then it's going to be challenging for us.
Martha, has there been any cases of COVID amongst your employees?
No, ma'am. We've been really fortunate. Our staff has remained healthy through this time, and we have not had to pay COVID-related paid leave. So probably all of you are familiar with the expiring FFCRA requirements to pay leave due to COVID. We did not have to incur that expense during this time. And of course, those requirements have been now lifted with the expiration in December. So really, it's going to be planned leave or other just accrued leave that's taken that could occur over the next 2 quarters. Another piece of the financial picture is we've done an analysis, and the leave plays right into this. As I said, the leave costs are much higher than they normally are this time of year. That drives our fringe expenses. And so I think it's $119,000 our leave wages alone. Again, much higher than we normally experience this as of this time of year. So what's happening is, as you know, we're seeing a savings in many of our indirect expenses. We're not traveling, we're not going to as many trainings and things like that. So we're saving about $45,000, but our fringe costs are about $85,000 more than we're recovering right now. So that delta, about $45,000, is really the major driver of where things are right now. So what are we going to do? We need to reduce our expenses. I mean, first and foremost, we've got to get spending under at a lower rate. So as I mentioned, we've renegotiated the copiers. We're evaluating each one of our software and other subscriptions for support needs. I'm going to get down to bare bones for many of those monthly subscription fees. And we're suspending all what I would call non-contractual expenditures in the 3rd quarter. So anything that we're not already committed to, we will not be expending in the 3rd quarter. So staff has been notified. Everything will be under review. And while we may approve expenditures for grant reimbursement, the majority of our expenditures are going to be suspended in this next quarter. On the revenue side, we have the availability of dollars. We just need to more effectively draw that revenue down. So we're going to be reassigning time from several of our agency-funded activities to grant-funded activities. We have 3 staff members who were programmed this year to provide general support across the agency, and we're going to redirect their time to be programmatically specific. That's our administrative support and marketing, communications, public outreach that Sid Kumar leads. That's our GIS, data and research planning that Mark Bittner leads with the support from Lee Medford. All 3 of those staff members' time for the remainder of the fiscal year is going to be allocated to very project-specific assignments instead of that general support category. And then we've got these new grant awards that are coming in that we need to deal with too, to make sure that we can realign staff costs to grant-funded activities. So as I mentioned, we have a new $58,000 grant award. We will not expend all of that in the current fiscal year, but that started January 1, where we've got a funding request pending with PlanRVA for our regional indicators work. And we're going to be accelerating our activity in the hazard mitigation plan that was awarded and kicked off earlier this year, but has had kind of a slow start. So, in addition to this, we've been able to identify lots of opportunities to improve our kind of internal review process. So we've tightened our controls on time card review. We have already transition the time card review process to our senior managers. So myself, Terry, Mark Bittner, and Chet Parsons are the only people that review time cards now. And we're going to be reviewing those every pay period to make sure that staff members are spending time and planning to spend time in the assigned work areas. And we'll be increasing our communication with regard to scheduled leave, looking at approving earned compensatory time and taking of compensatory time in a much more narrowly focused window, and going to be asking staff members to provide to us every month what they plan to take as far as leave so that we can get ahead of that and respond accordingly. Finally, I wanted to put a request into the committee. I think we've got some opportunities this fiscal year to be able to dig into the internal financial management processes. So we wanted to request the committee approve up to $5,000 to procure technical assistance through a contract for financial technical assistance and support. I think I've listed a number of activities that we'd like to engage that technical assistance with, reviewing our financial statements and reconciliation of the financial statements back to grant statements. Like to have consult on our payroll allocation process to make sure that we're maximizing our opportunity for reimbursement. Take a look at enhancing our reporting templates so that we can get better information more quickly to be able to do the analysis and decision making. Take a look at that fringe benefit analysis and determine whether that's a, Mr. Blackwood, to your point, whether that's a function of just this moment in time, or this is something that we need to look at on a more holistic perspective, that if we're not recovering the total of our fringe rates, we need to change our system there. And then finally, to recast the fiscal year 2021 budgeted revenues and allocation of general funds to make sure that we recover the year-to-date net loss by the end of the year. So Terry and I have discussed, and I mean, Terry, I would welcome you to chime in if you feel like you want to, but I think the agency would benefit from some additional support in this area. And as I said before, at this point in time, we'd be asking for your permission to commit up to $5,000. The current budget, we haven't expended anything in this line item, but there is a budget for this type of activity. It's $25,000, and it's in the line item 7330 if you want to refer back to the financial statements. And we have received a quote for about 20 hours and talking through that list of 5 kind of key tasks or deliverables. And the current quote is about 20 hours, which based on their hourly rate would come to 3,500. And I've increased that to 5,000 just so that we don't get stuck in an incomplete process.
Hey, Martha, I think it's line item 7730. Just a note.
You are right. I'm sorry about that. It's actually 7730. Yeah, thank you for that correction. Here, services. Apologies for that. I missed.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. So that we already have it budgeted. We just simply need to execute that for the additional services needed, because it appears that we could use that service, Martha.
Yeah, and I think given the financial conditions, before we undertake an additional expenditure, we wanted to the committee and talking with you. I mean, I think we both agreed that that was the correct next step.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
This already being budgeted, is there any reason that the full board has to approve this, or?
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. If it's budgeted, the director has the authority to execute that. And you've said that so well in the past, sir. You're right on target, Canova. You're right on target. No, the board doesn't have to approve that. That's simply can be executed by the director. She's informing the finance committee, which I think is appropriate and good to do, and make sure that a correction is corrected, as you point out, line item, correct line item. So
Martha, you think this is going to, it says recast the budget for 2021 revenues now of general funds. So you're assuming that they're going to help you bring this back in line?
Yes, ma'am.
Is, if we're spending the money, trying to get back to the loss, get back or eliminate the loss, the $40-some thousand loss.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Who bid on it? And what companies bid on it?
We only received one quote. We saw the quote from Warren Whitney, I met with Jill Swinger, who you all are familiar with. I'd be happy to get other quotes. We also talked about the possibility of support through the VML VACO finance resource. So, if that's something you'd like us to do, we can do that. We thought, I thought that given the experience that Jill had with our organization, that might be a expedient way to go, but I'm happy to go with a different provider if
Yeah, I support the familiarity. I think that's so very important. You don't have to get a lot of time catching up to speed, because this is not the average accounting per se. So I would support that, given we have experience in that area.
Mr. Chairman, I have to ask a question though. Is Jill the one that was going to be giving us this consulting, or somebody else in the firm?
No, I spoke specifically with her, and it would be her that would be providing the technical support.
Well, how is she going to help us change when she helped us set this up to begin with?
I mean, she hasn't been involved with the agency now for more than a year. So I think she'd be able to come in and actually evaluate whether what she set up is running effectively or not.
Yeah, I know we've made some changes since Terry took over for Jill, and but I do have a question as to whether or not we ought to have fresh eyes on this.
Understood.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please. Yes, ma'am.
I have to agree with Supervisor Peterson, because we were in a financial situation when Jill, if I'm not mistaken, when Jill was with us.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I understand being familiar, but sometimes things need to change to make a difference. And so maybe it's not, and maybe when we said fresh eyes, maybe it truly needs to be fresh eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate your point of view and fresh eyes. The only point I was trying to make is that she has not been here in a year, and hopefully what she can do is look at what we have changed, what we have done, and make sure that what we're doing is in the best interest with regard to the organization. But I'm open to someone else. I just want to make sure that the person who comes in doesn't need exceptional amount of time to do it. But it's well worth getting another opinion. And so from that standpoint, I think that might be the best thing to do at this point.
Well, with VML and VACO, what type of services do they provide? Because I was thinking also that some of the counties involved wouldn't perhaps mind taking a look at it. And I'm not volunteering any particular person, but it seems to me that we're all in the same boat. I mean, different counties, and we are paying for this particular extension of services. So I know Henrico and Chesterfield, for instance, could take a look at it briefly and give some tips without, having to dig but so much, because they understand all this. Even
you're absolutely right, Pat.
Director of planning, in one of the counties. So
yeah, you're absolutely right, Pat. Martha,
could we not start with that or something, or
I'm sorry, Pat. You say what now?
Could we start? Could we start there?
Yeah, Martha, could you share with the committee what you've done? Can you share with the committee?
Yes, we actually did reach out on offer from Chesterfield County to provide some technical assistance, and have been working with them. We had a call on Friday morning to talk about their process for reviewing. They did not do an exhaustive review of our financial statements and grant reports, but did do a specific check on 2 of our grant funded programs, and we're able to work with Terry on reviewing segments of our financial statements as it related to those programs. And it was on their recommendation that I put this request together. given their staffing levels, they are not in a position to provide the continued technical support that we need to be able to resolve some of the findings that they had. And they advised that they thought that it could be helpful to us to seek that external support. I have not had a similar conversation with anyone from Henrico County. It took the Chesterfield County folks about, I don't know, about 2 weeks of intermittent time. It was spread over those 2 weeks to take a look at the information and request information from us and process that and give their suggestions. And asking them pretty specifically on Friday if they had the resources to provide the technical support to move the ball forward, they said no.
Okay.
But could I ask another question, Jim?
Yes,
Martha,
sir, please.
Your the proposal that you've gotten from, what is it, Whitney?
Warren Whitney Company, yeah.
This was 20 hours. What is the time frame for that proposal?
I'd like it, well, if we got permission to move forward, we would start it immediately, and I'd like it to be concluded by the end of February. But I think we'd have to come back to you to give you an update about whether or not the support could all be done in that time frame or not.
All right, I'm going to suggest to the committee, this is a relatively small amount. It works out to $3,500 that Martha has asked for, and we're on a short time frame.
Yes.
And I would tend to say, let's give it a try based on working this out and having all this work completed by the end of February, rather than wasting another month or two of trying to find somebody else to help when we need the help now.
Yes.
And if it doesn't work, then we might have to take a different tack. But I also would like to have other eyes beyond just Jill's and Warren Whitney looking at this. Okay.
That makes sense. That's a good point. I'm concerned about the time span. We have to really take a serious look very quickly. Time is one thing from my perspective. Timing is of the essence. And if we want someone else to maybe Iveco or VML, that might be an opportunity or an idea. But I have to agree with you. I think the amount is not significant, considering that our loss has mounted to, at this point, $42,000. That situation has to be abated and lessened, and we have to get a handle on this and have to get it handled very quickly. So I agree with your assessment there. And if Martha can think of someone else that could maybe help in the interim along with her, with Warren Whitney, that would be certainly helpful. Something to look at. But it is budgeted, it's not exorbitant, and timing is of the essence. So I would move that she go forward and try to get this updated and corrected.
Can I just ask what Chesterfield said when you said they said that they recommended that you put this together? I guess it was an RFP.
No, they recommended that technical assistance would be beneficial to the agency, and they said, they're familiar with the previous arrangement we had with Warren Whitney, and so they suggested going there or to VML Iveco, and suggested that they thought particularly we would benefit from consulting advice about our payroll allocation and the implications of our current fringe cost recovery, and nailing down some balance sheet reconciliations that they looked at. But again, they only looked at 2 of our grant funded programs and did not take a comprehensive look at our entire agency financials.
Okay.
No, they didn't
Mr.
recommend.
Chairman,
yeah. Yes, sir.
May I suggest that we go for, allow Martha to go forward.
Yes, sir.
While this is going on during the month of February, we're only talking 4 weeks here.
Correct.
While this is going on, get with the Dean Lynch with VACO, and I'm not sure who the person is with VML, and get a good full picture of what they can offer and assistance from both of those organizations, so that we'll have that in hand if we need it after this, by the end of February.
I Agree completely. I'm in total agreement with that. And so Martha, I think you have your marching orders. It doesn't need unless we want to vote on it, it doesn't need a vote. Simply.
I'd appreciate that can put in the record the not to exceed dollar amount, just given some of the conversations that you all have had this year.
Okay. I don't think we need a vote, do we?
I think you can have a motion in a second and just agree by consensus.
Okay, I move as well. I will second Mr. Peters' recommendation, and I second that. And therefore, committee, I move that we move forward as recommended. All those in favor of the sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. Aye. I have 2 ayes.
And Mr. Peterson, just as a point of clarification, was your motion to authorize $3,500 or $5,000?
The motion was your request, the 5,000, but we recognize that what was anticipated was 3,500, but it does include that research and find out what the resources are available from VACO and VML while this is going on.
I agree with that. The VACO and VML also.
I completely agree. And so if there's agreement, and I see nods, Nolan, you're nodding. Okay, very good. I see the nods. Therefore, that motion carries. And thank you for reporting back to us in February where we are with that, and especially the impact from VML and VACO. Thank you, Martha.
Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
That was the material that I prepared for today. And I know our targeted adjournment is 3 o'clock. I wanted to make sure we had ample time to be able to talk through this material. So we didn't put anything else together. I'm sure we could answer questions if you have any.
Okay. Okay. Regarding what?
Any other topics?
Oh, any other items? Okay, I think we're settled on that issue. Any other concerns from any members then? Any concerns or any issues? Now, what I will recommend, Martha, is that as you look at the financials, make sure that I know you're going to be looking monthly or hearing monthly from employees regarding the leave. That seems to be the one issue. That's something we need to. Can we look at the total, what the impact could be? Because what's the total impact? What's the scope, if you will? What's the scope of that line item? And then, of course, a closer look at the revenues. I think we've looked at our expenses pretty closely. Are there other expenses you think we need to take a look at? I hope that the consultants will take a look at that as well. Having another set of eyes is going to be, I think, advantageous. But are there other areas we can take a look at? The leave, I know, is an issue. Are there other expenses you think we need to take a look at?
Yes. I mean, so 85% of our expenses, of our operating expenses, are personnel and personnel related. So
okay.
I think that as we discussed last month, I mean, what's coming is we have a very generous leave program, and I think we need to revisit that. And we have a very generous health insurance benefits program that is different than what most of the jurisdictions provide. And I think we're at the point where we need to give an honest evaluation of those two efforts. But I think coupled with that, and in fairness to the employees, we need to make sure that we maximize productivity of everybody on staff, and that we've got everybody assigned to do the work that they need to do. And we're just not an organization that can afford any sort of waste. We've got to make sure that we're productive in every area of our agency.
Okay, I agree. I want to know the scope of. I know the scope. Yeah, yeah, Pat.
Well, how about our timeline with the relocating of the offices? The new location. How are we with that? Because that is a major cost.
Yes, it is. We're slated to have that be a significant part of the discussion next month at your February meeting. the idea I think that you left with was to really dig into whether or not it's beneficial to move forward with a renegotiation of our current lease to stay where we are, which could be a more immediate relief to the costs that we're incurring, or if we want to stay through the lease and plan to move afterwards. You know, I mean, I think again, it's a matter of what we want to see now versus what we want to see in the future. But I think that those are the two points of discussion that we talked about last month were that decision point about how do we keep discussion of staying and leaving both on the table as we move toward our lease expiration date.
Have you had any discussion with the landlord or anything like that? No?
They are open to renegotiating.
Of course they are.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't approached that any more than just sort of a general inquiry based on the conversations that this committee has had the past two meetings. So
when is the deadline for telling them we're moving again? When is that deadline?
It's not until 2022.
Okay, all right.
Our lease expires in October of 2022, and there's I think it's a 3-month notice period. I'd have to review the lease to confirm that, but.
Toward that's a great question, Pat. Thank you. Toward that end, Martha, we need to look at what is the total cost. If we were to move, what would be the total expected cost? How would that impact our financials? And then, of course, I'm not sure that we can negotiate a lower lease rate going forward for the next 3 to 5 years. The space should be more readily available now, given COVID. Things should be a lot better financially in terms of available space. So we need to look at the total costs and what the impacts will be, including what the moving costs would cost us. Where will we be in 3 to 5 years, for example?
Yes, and I think it's important to remember that while rent is a reimbursable expense through our indirect cost recovery, moving costs would not be. And so we would need to fund the expense of moving out of our general fund. So, you know, that's an off the top, out of our fund balance expenditure. We are paying for more space than we need right now, even with the social distancing requirements and compliance under the now permanent emergency safety standards. We have more space than we need. It's not ideal. We have, I sit in a hallway. We have staff members who don't have dedicated offices, but we do have the square footage and we pay a premium right now. But the space here can be made to work if that's what we need to do. We have to weigh the pros and cons of staying and going.
Yeah, and I think cost is a function, but more important, our needs are a higher priority as well. What are our needs? We have to meet our needs first, and then we have to evaluate the cost thereof. And the cost of moving as well. What will be the cost of moving since it's not reimbursable? So those are numbers we're going to have to grapple with before we make a final decision, or not make a decision, excuse me, before we recommend a decision to the full commission. Okay.
We'll start putting together some rough estimates so that we can have that information at the February meeting.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Any other concerns or issues?
Well, I just would say, Nolan, I know you and I need to probably catch up, and so maybe you and I can connect before the next committee meeting.
Very good.
Happy to.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Thank you so very much. All right. Any other questions? Or no other questions or concerns? Then let's adjourn the meeting. Thank you, Bob.
I do have one concern, sir.
Yes, sir. Please.
How to get this bread pudding off of my mind that we talked about earlier on. I've been thinking about ever since.
I'm not sure I can answer that.
Supervisor Holland was there, but we had a conversation. So we're going to think of a very creative way to